Hello, everybody. I spoke to Chris Arnade, who is the author of the new book, Dignity, which is something that I would recommend everybody read because, among other things, it's a very careful and empathetic exploration of life in the contemporary American underclass, which is just not a demographic that gets enough attention in national political narratives, and it's a demographic that spans race, geography, political affiliation, religious identity, and so forth. And I was able to have a fairly extensive conversation with Chris about various aspects of the book. So purchase it. It's better to have, I would say, in a physical copy than most books because there's just something about having it tangibly in your hands that kind of underscores the significance of the content. And additionally, there are many vivid and compelling photographs that somehow work better on the page than the screen, in my opinion. Anyway, this discussion was recorded Monday, July 22nd, in New Paltz, New York. And here we go. Okay. Chris Arnade has taken one last glance at Twitter. He's going to see if he can impose some discipline for approximately an hour and 15 minutes. If you need a Twitter break at the 45-minute mark, I can accommodate that.
Break, motherfucker. Twitter.
That could be accommodated too.
I'll do another 2-year Twitter break.
Yeah, so you did a 2-year Twitter break. I don't know. Was it? It wasn't exactly 2 years. It was like a year and a half, right?
It was a year and like 10 months. 10 months, I don't know.
And you were talking to me last night about your observations about how, I guess, discourse on Twitter has shifted just within that span of time.
Yeah, people have gotten a lot more cynical. I mean, there used to be, I guess it's kind of the owning the stigma thing. People have actually like to get ratioed now. There used to be some shame getting ratioed. Now it's actually
I'm still ashamed when it happens.
No, but it's actually a tactic that people use. I once said it was like the sex tapes for media personalities, which is, oops, I got attention. Oh, darn.
Yeah. But sometimes getting ratioed is not particularly pleasurable. I mean, you get a lot of angry people inundating you with mean insults.
I think people have realized that people have developed strategies and tactics. I think the people who are smart about it, who are intentionally provocative and want to get ratioed, learn to basically just tune out their responses, right? They just want the attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of, in many ways, people are taking the lead from Trump. Trump wants to get ratioed. I mean, one of Trump's secrets is he knows bad attention is as relevant as good attention. If the bad attention is coming from people, the right people, then it's perceived on your side as good attention.
I don't know. I think in the moment, if you're being ratioed, the goodness of it doesn't necessarily shine through.
I don't think you're somebody who should be out there battling then.
Maybe not. But, it's kind of my nature. Okay, so you have this book out, Dignity, and it's gotten a fair amount of attention, I would say.
Correct.
Are you okay with that attention?
In general, I mean, I'm not really somebody, when you write a book, I guess you just have to learn to deal with the attention. My bigger frustration is the book is meant to be about the people in the book, and to the degree it's about the attention's about me, I'd rather shift it to the people in the book. That was the whole goal of the book, to give people who don't get the attention I think they deserve, or aren't listened to the degree I think they should be listened to be listened to. And so when people focus on my story,
well, I mean, in fairness, you are a character in the book.
Right. When I originally wrote the book, I was not. I didn't have myself in it.
It's a first-person account in a lot of ways.
Right. And so the book evolved into that because it just was impossible to read without me in it because I was there. It would be wrong for me to not have myself in it, even though I try to minimize my role, because there's this goal in journalism and this goal in sociology of this concept of basically the fly on the wall, the completely unnoticed observer who watches things
Mm-hmm.
and reports on them. That's impossible. There's zero chance that will ever happen. First of all, partially because who I am. A lot of the bulk of the book is set in minority communities, and I'm not a minority, and so my very presence is just noticed.
You're a minority in non-racial respects.
I'm a white guy, and I was in non-white guy neighborhoods, and so I was just noticed, and there's no chance for me to, quote, blend in. And so I had to include myself because I impacted the process.
Right.
And it would be wrong to the reader not to have me there.
Yeah. But in you being there, it opens up a legitimate, I would think, maybe, avenue of criticism that is directed at you individually because you're a facet of the story.
That's right. But again,
which is to say you can't necessarily blame people for not focusing exclusively on the characters that you portray.
That's fair, and I don't. I mean, like I said, I would prefer the attention be less on me and more on the characters, but I know that's not necessarily going to happen.
Right. What has been the best thing about the attention you've received, and what's the worst?
The best thing is, I want people to read the book, and so that's good. And the attention I get that makes me the happiest is when I find a person who's read the book and reaches out to me and says something like, you helped me understand my parents better. My dad was an addict, or my mom was an addict, and you gave me a better sense of understanding of who they were. Or somebody, I got a message the other day from somebody who had struggled about leaving their hometown, and the book helped them, give them some perspective on what their struggle was, and that they weren't alone in that struggle. Just trying to decide what to do. So I think that has always been, and my work on addiction was also that way. When I was more active online and writing about addiction, I often got letters from, or emails or messages from people whose parents had been an addict, or sister or brother had been an addict, or they themselves had been an addict, and they were, very heartfelt messages of saying, you helped me put in perspective some of the things I saw in my life. The negative attention is just like, well, I mean, at this point in time, if you write anything that has any political angle to it, you're going to get attacked, and you're going to get praise, depending on what people see in your work.
You downplayed consciously the partisan political angle. I mean, it's not as if it's a broadside against a particular party or even about Trump necessarily. The word Trump, I think, only appears in the book twice, right? Maybe 3 times.
Maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, not that many for a contemporary political book, let's put it that way. So the fact that it can engender still so much animosity shows that anything is put in that kind of partisan framework at this point.
Right. I mean, it was an intentional. For those who don't know, the book is about kind of my 5 years spending time in stigmatized neighborhoods across the United States, and in the middle of that 5 years was Trump's election. So the process and the project played out while Trump was rising and while he was elected. And during the writing of this book or the project, I had opinions about the rise of Trump because I was in neighborhoods looking at poverty and addiction, and where in the white neighborhoods I was in, I saw Trump resonating. I saw him resonating far earlier than I think a lot in the media saw. So I had some things to say about Trump, and eventually they're in the book. But my goal was to write a book that I hope can be read 15 years from now without people fully understanding what, I don't want to write to the very moment that that we are in right now, because I think the themes are larger than what's going on right now.
Yeah, you mentioned that before to me, but don't you think in 15 years people are going to look back on the Trump era and want to know what was going on in the moment, or is it going to be lost to history where it's going to be seen as sort of too myopic? My instinct is that I could imagine people still being somewhat fixated on the 2016 election quite a long time from now.
I think there's a lot of people out there who've written about the 2016 election, at least in the kind of inside baseball level, and this was intended never to be that.
Right.
It was about the larger themes of dignity, the title of the book, and frustration that is in so much of the communities that I visited, that in many cases provided a very favorable environment for someone like Trump to rise in. So in that sense, it's very relevant to the times, I think. But the inside baseball of like what Trump said here or what this person said about Trump. The other thing was,
well, that's a genre of political book that's always been written and gets forgotten about within 5 years, unless it's like a seminal classic like the Richard Ben Kramer book.
I mean, the other thing is I would say the other reason he's not mentioned a lot is because I'd say that roughly 70% of the people in the book didn't vote for him. I'd say the largest class of people in the book are people who just didn't vote at all. And politics never comes up. They don't think about politics. They don't talk about politics. Politics, they're so beneath, they're so marginalized, so stigmatized, so disenfranchised that they don't even bother trying to play the game or caring.
Or they don't connect their lived experience to national politics in any way.
That's right. And they shouldn't necessarily, because it's, as many people.
Or if they do, it's all like a cynical detachment.
Right. In many cases, there were people who outright just simply told me, like, what do I care if Obama's president, or what do I care if Trump's president, or what do I care if, Bush is president? It hasn't changed anything in my neighborhood.
Yeah, they're all corrupt or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that kind of very cynical attitude, I think, is what is more prevalent than I'd say the frustration that I wrote about. And so in some senses, I wish I'd written more about that cynical attitude, which is a sense of just like, why bother engaging in the political system, because the political system always fucks me over anyways.
Yeah. Speaking of the title, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the working title for a while Pain rather than Dignity?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
No, we went through a bunch of different titles. One was...
When you were first thinking about the book, weren't you thinking about entitling it Pain?
I think I called it... maybe I have in my book proposal... I don't remember what it was, honestly.
It was Pain. I remember. You showed it to me. It was Pain.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. At least I don't remember that. One of the working titles was... it was just too long, but the one that... so when I was doing this project, I would always tell people, like, they'd ask me, what's this for? And I'd say it's for a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a book on what? And so I tried various ways of explaining what the book was on, and eventually the one that resonated with people who I was spending time with was, anything you wanted to learn about America, you can learn in a McDonald's.
Yeah.
And that eventually became my working title, just because everybody was like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Or if you want to understand America, go to McDonald's.
Yeah, I would read a book of that title,
right,
if there's a sequel coming. So McDonald's is a big setting in the book. You call it sort of the town square and these dilapidated communities, and I almost wonder, could you imagine a public venue or some other like non-corporatized venue serving the same function as the McDonald's do in those communities? Because McDonald's is unique in that a lot of them are open 24/7. You can go in and get Wi-Fi and charge your phones and that kind of thing. And it just occurs to me, is there like a theoretical alternate location that people could go to and they would get the same value that they get from McDonald's?
In many cases, that's the library. The public library serves that role now. Obviously, the public libraries don't have the same hours
And you're not supposed to eat and drink in them.
Yeah, you can't eat and drink in the libraries. So there's more rules in public
Although
library.
I've snuck many drinks into libraries.
But in bad neighborhoods, or quote bad neighborhoods, stigmatized neighborhoods, the libraries serve that function also of McDonald's as kind of ad hoc community center for marginalized people. Again, the amount of freedom you have in a library is less. The amount of resources is greater. I mean, you can read the paper, you can read books, you can go online. But in general, the people I spent time with preferred McDonald's to the library because of the additional freedom, including the food.
And you can talk.
Sorry, yeah,
and you're not supposed to be loud in a library.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You can take
so
over.
I mean, so when I'm saying like, is there an alternate location? I mean, like a place where you can go and you can talk and you converse and you can be relatively unmonitored. You can eat and drink. You can do all these kind of communal functions that now seem to have all been subsumed into this corporatized monolith of McDonald's.
I mean, it used to be, in some sense, literally the town square, right? It used to be a Central Park downtown, you know. In some cases, in some cities, the park still serves that function, like Druid Hill Parks in Baltimore serves that function. Mm-hmm. But you don't have the Wi-Fi, you don't have the electricity. You know, a lot of the people I'm dealing with don't have cars, so they can't get to a place necessarily unless it has public transportation. And
these are places without like a cool downtown coffee shop.
I mean, Starbucks it serves that role for kind of wealthier people, I think. But no, I can't think of anything off the top of my head where that kind of that role is McDonald's provides in many cases. Again, it's has a lot going for it, in that it got cheap, good, inexpensive, good food.
You don't even really have to buy anything.
No, you don't. And one of my favorite ones is
and the employees don't care enough to really.
Well, often the employees have been there before, and remember, it's meaning they themselves have been at times going through rough times or whatever, and so they understand. And you know, one of my favorite strategies is the person who walks in and immediately goes to the garbage can and pulls out a thrown out cup or a thrown out newspaper, preferably both, and then takes the cup over, get a refill, and sit there and read the paper. You know, that's if you have nothing, that's your strategy, and it works. I've done that before. And
whereas that wouldn't fly really in like an upper scale coffee shop where maybe people are a little more attentive to that.
The one I like to contrast it with, because again, a bunch of my book's thesis in many ways is about our differences being about education. Is the people who I spent time with in McDonald's, the bulk of them could not walk onto a college campus without having the police called. So in that sense, McDonald's are more welcoming than college campuses are for the marginalized, for addicts and homeless. But the employees themselves are often, remember, McDonald's doesn't pay a great wage necessarily, and a lot of the employees themselves are using the McDonald's as a way station when they're not working. The most shocking one, it sounds shocking, but it isn't once I met the person and understood, was the woman who works a night shift at a 24/7 McDonald's in the South, who I think she worked the 11:30 to 6:30 shift. But she was a young mother, and her 4-year-old child would come in and sleep in one of the booths overnight. And she would sit there prior to her shift and have him play on the phone, watch our videos, and then give him some food, and then put his blanket down on the bench of the booth, and he'd go to sleep, and he'd sleep overnight, and she could watch him from behind the counter. And then the other employees on shifts would sit there and sit at the booth with the sleeping child.
Right. So it's almost like a communal daycare.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've spent time actually in those 24/7 McDonald's where I didn't particularly have a place to go. So you do kind of not enter a community, but there's almost like this understanding that nobody's really going to question anybody else who, for whatever reason, is in an overnight McDonald's all night, or like, you know, you do develop something of a, maybe bond is too strong of a word, but there's something there that does develop.
in many of the cases, not only the overnights, the people who use it daily to escape the heat or the cold or whatever end up bonding with the employees, to the point where I've seen employees actually slide food to someone who's homeless.
Yeah, which could get them in trouble.
Right, but in general, what happens is what they'll do if they make a sandwich, it gets returned, right, and they have to throw it away. Instead of throwing it away, they give it to the person who sits there daily, or they just simply will buy one for the person themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a I don't think anybody who's going to listen to this will be surprised for me to say this, but I often find that the poor are much more giving to other people than the wealthy are when it comes to kind of daily interactions.
The conservative would say, "What the heck are you talking about? Look at how much I pay in taxes."
Right.
I'm giving a heck of a lot.
I think wealthy people end up finding lots of reasons not to help people. It's the kind of I gave at the office mentality. But, poor people, again, if you spend time around the homeless, the people who help the homeless the most, who help beggars, who help people who are panhandling, are almost always working class or lower income people.
Mm-hmm. The other environment that you delve into is the Walmart parking lot. And there have been times where I've slept in a Walmart parking lot, and again, there's this kind of mutual understanding that develops where certain people have their spots, and there are places where it's better to stay for the night than others that are less lit or more lit, or depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, Walmart actually...
and it actually is a useful public service, because there are some places where if you park overnight, the police will come.
Right, and Walmart actually, I think someone did a count. It's franchise by franchise location, but I think roughly 80%.
There's a website you can go on which tells you,
Yep.
Can you overnight park?
Yeah, I think 80% of them, or 70% are legal overnight parking. And they for them, it's also because a lot of the people who are doing it are retirees and campers.
Yeah.
So for them, it's kind of their business model.
Yeah, and they'll go and buy stuff.
Right. I can always... It takes me half a second in a Walmart parking lot to find the corner where you park overnight. You become pretty good at spotting it. It's the the van with the shirt over a window.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real community there. And to me, the more fascinating part of it is the Walmart at 3 a.m, because if you go in to use a bathroom at 3 a.m, it's Walmart. There are people shopping at 3:30 in the morning in Walmart.
Sure.
It's not just it's not only a few. It's a lot of people at times.
Yeah, and they're going to be the more itinerant types who...
I think it's a lot of it's are people who are off a late shift.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of immigrants, Mexican Americans, who might wash dishes until 1 a.m, or might, whatever, have jobs that have very odd hours. And so, or Somali immigrants or Iraqi immigrants who are, their job requires them to be up till odd hours, or maybe the day shift, work night shifts otherwise.
Yeah. And there are people who, if you want to get their perspective on public affairs or life or anything really, it's hard to know where to catch them other than at a place like Walmart. It's like that's where they're going to convene. Right.
So the Walmart, McDonald's, I basically had 4 places I'd go into when I'm in a town, and 4 places I made a point of always going. One was the McDonald's. That became just a standard process. That was my first stop. The second was a Walmart parking lot, in Walmart itself, if they had a Walmart. Some of them didn't. The third was a community college, if they had a community college. Usually people would have a satellite office of a community college. And the fourth were churches. And those are my kind of 4 places to kind of find people and talk to them and get a sense of what they felt in a way that I felt was natural, and I wasn't kind of cherry picking what I wanted to hear. So much of what my style of reporting or my style of whatever ended up getting
You can call it reporting. It's okay.
Ended up kind of getting mocked at some point.
Do you not consider yourself? I mean, I think we might have talked about this
No,
before.
no,
You
I
don't
don't
consider
consider
yourself a reporter
No,
or a journalist?
I'm just a writer and photographer.
But I mean, this is the book of journalism.
Not really. I mean, I
If you go around and talk to people and you bring new information into the universe, you are conducting an act of journalism.
yeah, but I'm not hired by anybody. I don't work for an outlet. I don't.
You published a book.
Right. But
And you've written for The
Guardian.
Guardian
We can go
and-
back for this for a second. I want to finish the story.
Yeah.
My frustration with, the people, and then also there was other people started doing it when some of my stories got traction. There were other people who also did the same thing. Some people were doing it concurrently as well. I didn't invent this.
Right. It's not rocket science.
Yes, it's not rocket science. What it requires, though, is freedom to do it, right? It requires the ability to do it. But regardless, what frustrated me about a lot of the other stuff being done out there was the places they chose to go to, in my mind, were not very much different than finding the political elite. They were the political elite of Youngstown or the political elite of Gary, the politicians, the mayors, the community organizers. And those people are, again, not who I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on people who do not consider themselves political, haven't been involved in politics. And I mean, that's the bulk of America. And so even when people out there even when journalists go to a, quote, Trump country or non-Trump country or Hillary country, and they do the reporting from diners things, they always choose the diner where the local elite go, and so that's kind of why I chose the places I chose, which is the people there are not at all politically connected in any way, shape, or form, and that was the target audience or the target group in my process. But going back to the issue of journalism, I think there's a lot of expectations and guidelines that journalists follow that I don't necessarily agree with, and I don't want to be hemmed in by. So,
like what?
Helping people out. As a journalist, you're not supposed to help people out. You're not supposed to buy. I buy them meals. There are times
Give them rides places.
Give them rides. I've taken to hospitals. I've taken to detox. I've let people shoot up in my car. I keep clean water, and I used to keep clean needles in my car so that they don't get an infection. Those are things that journalists are not allowed to do. And I think that's wrong not to be allowed to do that. As a decent human being, if someone's suffering and hungry, I'm going to get them a fucking meal.
Well, because you don't abide by predominant journalistic standards doesn't mean that you are also not
fine. You can
doing
journalism. You
journalism.
can call me a journalist then. I'll accept the tag.
I mean, the book is a classic
I'll accept
example
the
of journalism.
tag.
Not that I care that much, really, but just it seems a little odd to get hung up on the term. If anything, if you do a journalism that cuts against the grain in that way, it's more important to describe you as a journalist than others who are just kind of in the herd.
But going back to why I chose the target audience I chose, partially because I was writing about poverty and addiction, but the other reason was, when we talk about politics in this country, one of my big frustrations is the way that we cover politics in this country. The way I ended up becoming frustrated was, it's very much an inside baseball mentality, which is you can't, I don't know why anybody goes to a presidential press conference. Like, what are you going to learn at the daily briefing?
Mm-hmm.
Why you have 55 people sitting there asking the president or the presidential spokesman questions that you just, what does that get you? I mean, that's not, that it's like following, as I keep saying about politics is like a sport, but it's very, very different from a sport in a very important way. The fans choose who wins, right? Like, it doesn't matter if Hillary beats Trump according to the rule, he scores more runs. It just cares if the fans clap louder, and so if you're in D.C., you're not talking to the fans.
Right. Or if the fans clap louder according to their electoral college allocation.
But that's the rules, man. I mean, that's how we decide who wins.
Yeah.
Like, the fans currently right now, the fans in Ohio have a greater say than the fans in, New York City.
Yeah. So I accompanied you on one of these excursions that actually made it into the book.
Lewiston.
Yeah.
Did it ring true, by the way?
It did. I remember one of the quotes almost verbatim.
Which one of
in the Snowshoe Club?
Yep.
With the guy saying that the kids get along better.
Yep.
With, the
That's
white
right,
kids.
You were there for that, I remember.
Yeah, I was there for that exact quote. I mean, I was talking to that guy.
Yeah.
The bartender.
I'm glad I captured it correctly then.
I mean, I don't know. I can't say 100% word for word but I mean, that it accords with my recollection. Yeah, but he said that if there's any strife between the whites or the French Canadians or whatever in Lewiston, it's between the adults, whereas the kids get along perfectly. And in fact, the Somalis are better behaved in school than the white kids.
Yeah, did that second part make it in the book? I think it did.
Yeah, it did.
But what didn't make it into the book, I don't think, is the fact that he was a Trump supporter.
He was, but he had no antipathy for the Somalis.
No, but so that didn't make it in the book.
Right.
And
which would have been a good thing to make in the book.
But it didn't. Part of the reason it didn't make it in the book because it would have been hard to fit in there. But as an aside to listeners, I find it fascinating that I don't know if you were with me this time because I went back to Lewiston I think 4 times, but that bartender had just come back from a Trump rally with his daughter. And
yeah, I think that was the time I was there.
And he was the one. He also interjected himself in another conversation where he stopped a guy beating up on the Somalis.
Yeah.
Not just this one, a second time.
Yeah.
Where he very much was supportive of the Somali community. And at the same time was very much pro-Trump. And I think that would spin a lot of people's heads.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, it just goes to show that how people develop political preferences is almost randomized. I mean, it's very scattershot. It's a kind of a bundle of instincts and compulsions, and it doesn't fit into the neat patterns that tend to be emphasized by the national media.
His support of the Somalis was very personal, again, because he had dealings with the kids and with the Somali community that I think a lot of other people didn't.
Yeah, didn't he coach a team or something?
Yeah, I believe so. And so, but it was, I have to check my notes, but he was, so I mean, he had a very, and I think that's what I found in many of these communities where you had immigration impacting the community. The people who were most kind of treated the whole thing as benign and most open-minded about the changes were people who worked, who overlapped on lived reality. And I think one of my frustrations is a lot of things that didn't make it in the book was time spent in other immigrant communities, mostly Mexican American, where the experience of a lot of what would be considered to be closed-minded Trump supporters, white working class, they interacted a lot more with Mexican Americans on a day. I mean, they worked together. They worked in the oil fields together.
Yeah.
They shared They both. They went out to bars and drank together.
Right.
And they were buddies.
They interact as equals.
Yeah, but
whereas the liberals sitting in their enclaves if they do interact with them, they interact with them in almost a servile.
The interaction level is different.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go, I think in many cases, a lot of people who have the strongest views on immigration, there's a lot of hypocrisy on both sides. But I was going to say, my frustration was you in both cases, you'd have these white working class guys and women who spent their time work 24 hours a day often, like oil fields or, and then, take these 7-day intense work work on rigs together, and then go out and drink at night, and then badmouth Mexican Americans the next day.
Mm-hmm.
It's just.
But they're okay with like
Juan.
Yeah, who
their
works,
friend Juan.
Yeah.
I mean, I had many people say that to me, where Juan would be sitting there, and they say, "I have a real problem with immigration, but not Juan here."
Right.
And Juan's kind of looking like, "Eh."
Yeah, Juan's cool.
And so that's always been very frustrating to me. That
Well, of course, I mean, it's much easier to have an aversion to just something in the abstract than somebody who you actually deal with in a
but the
tactile
inability to
way.
translate it into kind of like, if I'm cool with Juan and Juan's my best friend, or Jose or Mark or Bill, and they come from wherever, but I'm not cool with that always was very frustrating. But in general, I think one of the Walmarts and McDonald's are very diverse. If you want to find where immigrants are, go to both of those places.
Mm-hmm. Why is it that people fail or don't have an interest in making that connection? Between Juan, who they're on good terms with, and then just the issue more broadly.
I think there's a lot of.
I mean, is it necessarily inconsistent to say I get along on an interpersonal level with Juan, but I also have a broader policy critique of immigration on a whole?
But I think that's not inconsistent, but I'm not sure that's necessarily what drives a lot of people. I think a lot of people are just, I'm scared of change, and and what immigration represents is bigger change than what I see with my friends here. They're cool. My friends are cool, but they've been here 5-6 years. I don't like the new guys,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard that actually a lot, which is like Juan's family might have come here in the early '90s, so I'm cool with them, but I'm not necessarily cool with the new people. I've actually heard. I mean, again, the one of the more. If you want to talk about jaw-dropping hypocrisy, or confused opinions, if another way of thinking about it is, as you know, I spent a lot of time in El Paso, and there's literally a fence in El Paso. I mean, it was built, I think, by George Bush. I think it was in 2000s it was built. There's a fence that literally goes through El Paso that cuts off El Paso from Juarez.
Mm-hmm. I've walked across the pedestrian bridge between
Me
El
too,
Paso and
multiple times, but there are 4. I think there's 3 pedestrian bridges. 4. They're very active. There are like 100,000 people a day walk across it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very active. I mean, it's a very porous border in the right sense of the word. But I interviewed people who literally live against the fence. The fence delineates their backyard. I interviewed a Mexican American woman who came 20 years earlier and is now a citizen, who is very glad to have the fence and very much didn't want any more immigrants coming.
Mm-hmm.
And yet she herself had come from Mexico. She herself had, become a citizen, but she didn't want anybody else coming. And so, I think the opinions of people within the immigrant communities are a little more complex than most people assume as well. That
Yeah, I mean, it's become a meme, but there are people who point out that a lot of the Border Patrol agents who are now being castigated as concentration camp guards are themselves non-white.
They're mostly non-white.
Yeah,
I've seen them. I've seen because of the increased issues at the border. When I was in El Paso recently, I stay in cheap motels. And they're so out of employees that they import them. They bring busloads of new employees who patrol the border and work in the border issues from elsewhere. I've been in hotels with them. I've shared, hotels for 2 weeks with them. They are not elites. They are working class blacks and Hispanics, and whites, but mostly black and Hispanics, who don't have a lot going, who don't have a lot of, haven't had a lot work well for them in their life, who are taking whatever job they can, and so, the whole process is ugly and messy, and you're throwing people into a situation in this case, who aren't trained to deal with what's going on, and are being put in an awful situation. In my mind, I mean, they don't know they don't know what's going on.
What do you think goes through their minds when they hear nationally prominent political figures calling them concentration camp guards?
The ones I've seen, the ones I've seen, or I didn't spend much time hanging out with them, but the ones I've seen were, I mean, I don't think they listen to, I don't think they're certainly not on Twitter.
No, but I mean, I think some of that probably broke through.
I mean, I was there in January. It's been a while. So I don't know where they are now mentally. But again, it's like, you know, it's also what I saw a lot of the police who were put into the neighborhoods I spend time in, certainly in New York, is a lot of them are young and scared. They're not trained for what they're about to see. And, you know, the police, the way they patrol the worst neighborhoods is often with the most inexperienced people. Right. So it just plays out badly.
Yeah. So what is your response to people who would criticize you and say that this is, I think the term that they use is poverty porn, or you went on a poverty safari and you just kind of, you know, helicoptered in? I'm not accusing you of that, but that's sort of a line of criticism they hear, especially from people on the left who say that this is just a genre of journalism or quasi-journalism that tries to put the plight of ordinary impoverished people in a framing that's somehow palatable to elites, so they can look at it and kind of like, you see where I'm going?
Well, I'm always skeptical when anybody uses a buzzword like poverty porn. My smart ass response used to be, well, we need more poverty porn because we got a lot of luxury porn out there. Just look at the New York Times, you know, like fashion section. What is that?
Right.
You know, you who work at the New York Times who are accusing me of poverty porn, whose business is built on selling fashion porn and $40,000 trips with Tom Friedman to the Greek islands to learn about whatever. I mean, come on.
I was just reading the New York Times wedding pages. Like, it's always people who have weddings with whom, you know, Salman Rushdie happens to show up, or
like, I mean, go through the ads of a New Yorker, right? I mean, you the great voice of the people, the New Yorker, selling, you know, jewelry and watches that cost $20,000. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. But the larger issue is, I mean, look, anytime you work in a stigmatized community or present a stigmatized community to a broader public, you can do it very badly or you can do it okay. You know, there's no hard, fast rules for how to do that. Hence, going back to the journalist title, you know, there is no hard, fast rules on how to accomplish this task in a way that is respectful of the people that you're talking to. In general, doing it right correlates with spending more time on it. In the Bronx, I literally spent 3 years. So, you know, 3 years getting to know people. And so that's hardly flying in and flying out. And other times I spend, 2 weeks. Is that some flying in and flying out? Yeah. But, you know, my goal was twofold.
How could you not fly in and fly out? I mean, it's a big country.
Right. And so that was my
goal. You're going to live for a year everywhere?
My goal was to do an intense 3 year in one place and then check to see if it's true elsewhere by taking what I learned in that one place and translating it. Again, you can do it right and you can do it wrong, and everybody who does it needs to be sensitive to that issue and be aware of it and keep it in the background of their mind of how they present it. I mean, I labored over the presentation a long time to make it feel like it was done right, and to not make it feel any buzzword exploitive or demeaning. I think there is absolutely nobody who's read the book that I've a review that says anything but I've been respectful, or the people are presented in a respectful way and their views are being in a respectful way. The issue I have is with the broader conversation about it is there are two ways to present. Look, you can, if you want to know what's going on in the country, you need to look at all perspectives. You need to look at the perspective of the person themselves who are part of, like, if you want to understand Youngstown, Ohio, read the essays and thoughts of people living in Youngstown, but also the person who's an outsider who comes in and looks at Youngstown in a detached way can also offer you insight into Youngstown that the person who grew up there might not see because they're not aware of it because they grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
I think both perspectives are valid and add value. Neither is exclusive. Neither is the truth. Both put together give you a more complete picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the question is, like, if you're denouncing this as poverty porn, what is your prescription for what would be the appropriate way to document that kind of lifestyle? Then they don't seem to have a tangible answer because it's a big endeavor.
To me, the most ethical way to do it is if you want to present a snapshot of what life is like in El Paso, the right thing to do is to go to El Paso, spend 3 years there, and get to know people and encourage them, curate their writings and present their writings in a magazine. That it would be the best way going forward to do it. That's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you need a magazine.
Right, but again, that's an example of what I think is the right way to do it. Other people who have gone through this mental problem, who've done what I've done and moved on to the next step, sometimes what they do is they go into the communities, they give people cameras and ask them to take pictures, and then they take the pictures and then curate them. That's another way to try to handle it, to get the local perspective.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like about the book is that it's kind of it just has a physical object. It's kind of one of the few books that come out recently, I think, that you kind of want to read in physical form. It's like, it doesn't seem like it would quite lend itself to a Kindle, People buy it on Kindle, which I don't, God, thank you for buying it on Kindle. Right.
I mean, a third of the book is
it's like a hard, heavy book with vivid photos that span the entire page length.
I mean, again, I started this whole project as a photographer, and so my photography has become secondary to my writing. But I do think my photography is, I'm proud of my photography.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of it's great. I actually, I flagged a couple photos that I just kind of wanted to ask you to elaborate on.
So one thing that I've gotten criticism for, and I understand the criticism, is I don't caption my photos.
Mm-hmm.
And that was intentional. So I understand why you might want to ask questions.
Okay, so here's one of put the book down here.
You just tell me the page. I'll open my book. I have too many copies of my books.
The photo pages aren't paginated, or at least my copy's not.
No, they're not, are they?
So I'll just show you. So this one.
Okay. It's two women looking in my telescope. So that's in Hunts Point. Those two women are sex workers.
Is that the telescope that's in your basement right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw that.
To give you, to give some biography, I used to be a physicist, and that included a partial career in astronomy, or a few years. And so I have a large telescope, and I used to bring it in my car, just carry it around in case I saw something I wanted to, if I saw Saturn popping up or Norwegian Air.
Yeah, can we just clarify that last night you were looking at the sky and you said, oh, there's a Norwegian Air because of the airport nearby. There's a Norwegian airline, and it turned out
to be Saturn. But my eyes are not what they used to be.
I've been like half blind my entire life, but still I could discern that it was not an airplane.
So I used to go these are sex workers who I got to know pretty well. And I remember the night was getting, it was turning to night, and I was there with them talking. And I think it was Jupiter was out next to the moon, or it was Saturn and the moon, I believe. They were adjacent to each other in a rare form, and I'm like, hey, have you guys ever, seen the moon through a telescope? And they're like, no. Have you ever seen Saturn through a telescope? No. So I dragged out my telescope, set it up, and that picture happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was kind of a beautiful moment. They were really, they loved it.
Yeah. No, it's also just a funny photo because there's it's just incongruous.
Right.
You have these women who are obviously street type people looking through this very sophisticated telescope.
And that picture actually went viral before I knew what that word meant.
Huh. 5
years ago.
Viral how?
I posted online, and then it went. Some famous popularizer of astronomy found it and posted it and did an interview about the photo.
Right. Here's another one.
Is it? So that's a prayer group in McDonald's. It's in the photo section called McDonald's. There are, I think, six photo sections, each one titled differently. That's a photo section named McDonald's, and it's of a prayer group. And
it's not. I don't think it's the McDonald's photo section. It's the coping section.
Coping section. Okay. Yeah. It's on a page with 4 other pictures of religion, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a prayer group, a Bible prayer group in the McDonald's that happened every day when I was in that town. Every day, I think at 11 o'clock, the same prayer group met, and they would accept anybody. And one of the people in the pictures, it's all white people except for one African American gentleman. He was passing through town, and so he spent the hour with them in their Bible study prayer group.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that photo. It's very again, there's sort of an incongruity about it because you can tell they're sitting at McDonald's, but they're also having this pretty intense devotional, seminar type thing. Or a prayer group would be one way to put it. I don't know why I said intense devotional seminar. And then on the very next page, I mean, this might be the most brutal photo in the entire book. It's this one right here.
It is Shelley shooting up.
And not just shooting up.
Yeah, she always gets bloody when she shoots up, bleeding out. That is probably. So I know Shelley well. She was once somebody I spent 3 transsexual addict. Been doing heroin since she was 13. It's probably that place is that picture is taken in that was one of the hardest physical pictures, not just emotionally, but physical pictures to take, because it's in a crawl space. I'm 6'2" and roughly 210 pounds, and you have to crawl along you have to crawl on top of a pipe in a place that barely fits me for about 20 yards before you find the space. And then, in addition, you go into another space, which is almost like the best way I can describe it is from if you see Harry Potter, where he's in the cupboard under the stairs, so it's shaped like a V. Mm-hmm. It's another space within the space, which is shaped like that downward sloping cement ceiling that goes down to a V. Yeah. That is maybe at the best 4 feet high. It's where they would shoot up, and where
you need a lot of lighting in that.
Right, so that is taken with candlelight.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
that wasn't your LED.
No,
because I saw you use that technique a couple times.
But that was taken with candlelight, and if you know anything about, for the photo geeks out there, it was 1/20th of a second shot, which means I had to hold really still, but I was laying on my back, and of course I asked her permission. I had known her at this point at 2.5 years, so she knew I'd always ask her permission if I could take the photo of her. And there were needles jabbing me in the back, which is not a good feeling when you lie on a needle in a heroin trap. But the picture, just by sheer coincidence, by sheer luck, came out. It shouldn't have come out. It should have been fuzzy or what have you. But part of the reason I like taking pictures of Shelley shooting up is not only did she enjoy the project, she's very proud of her technique, but there are other pictures that I have of her shooting up. It's very much a ritual for her. She's she is very proud that she's been intravenous drug user since the early 80s and is HIV clean. And part of that is because she's so careful and meticulous about the process that she is very, even in the worst circumstances, like literally under a bridge in a crawl space lit by candles, she's very careful about her process to keep herself healthy. The other small irony about that picture is that's literally a bridge. Underneath there is where the acela goes. And so one of my jokes have always been is when people say, get out of the acela corridor, I'm like, well, literally you just have to simply get out of the acela. If you want to find poverty and, and problems, you don't have to.
So people are on their way to
Boston,
yeah, or like New Haven or something.
Yeah,
or like you can get off in the wealthy Connecticut suburbs too.
So you would hear once in a while, it's not just the cellos that go in the track, but you knew when the cello went by because it would be louder. Soon before or soon after that picture, I'm not guaranteeing, I'm sure a cello went by while I was taking that picture.
That's funny. Well, not funny, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but she bleeds out, and a lot of her veins are corrupted at this point.
Mm-hmm. And here's one more.
That's Cesar. It's probably one of my most famous pictures. It's a Mexican-American man who is heavily tattooed.
They look like prison tattoos to me.
Right, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. Who is holding a tiny infant with, I think, choo-choo trains on their onesie.
So, I mean, it's this rough-looking guy who seems like he's probably been in and out of prison. I mean, I don't know for sure, but based on the tattoos, that would be a fair inference. Very gently and lovingly holding this infant who's kind of, pressed up against his chest.
Yeah, that picture is taken. That is probably 10 yards from the pedestrian bridge into Juarez in El Paso. He was heading to Juarez to visit his relatives. Mm-hmm. And when I took that picture, that's probably 2014 or so, one of my early pictures when I was in Juarez, Mexico.
Wait, so was this in Juarez or El Paso?
This is El Paso.
Yeah.
But he was heading to Juarez,
right,
with his newborn to give to his grandmother to babysit, I think, was what he said. It was a very quick interaction. He wasn't somebody I got to know well. I was just struck. There are sometimes as a photographer you see something will be a strong photo. Yeah. And that was one of them.
Yeah, this has sort of inspired me to get back into photography, which I had done for a little while with a real camera, not just an iPhone. But I'm moved to get back into it now after reading this. Okay, so some of the positive response you've gotten have been from elected officials, mostly Republicans, as far as I can tell.
Obama's ambassador to U.S. To Canada.
All right, some random guy who nobody's ever heard of.
And also
Obama's ambassador to Canada liked it. Okay, but in terms of people that you could actually easily Google.
I will also point out that the Canadian Prime Minister's chief of staff also is a very positive review in my book. He's a neoliberal.
Okay, in terms of Americans.
Okay.
Tom Cotton blurb the book. Josh Hawley, who is now creating a big stir because he delivered the speech at this National Conservatism Conference in D.C. He tweeted out an endorsement of the book a couple days ago. So why is it you think that the response has been seemingly more favorable, at least among prominent officials, with Republicans?
I'll ask you, was the book leftist was it a leftist book or a right book?
I told you this. I think you actually wrote it with your critics in mind. No, but I'm saying, which is to say that you emphasize the more recognizably leftist elements, or you emphasize the more recognizably leftist elements in order to ward off the inevitable criticism, which was going to be that somehow conservatives have an affinity with this style of journalism or analysis. But I think I would situate it on the left end of the spectrum, sure.
I mean, I find it to be very much... when I wrote the book, I felt like,
although it's not like you're doing deep analysis, really. I mean, it's mostly observational, with then some analysis sprinkled in. But it's not like there are paragraphs and paragraphs devoted to like expounding on why all this justifies some kind of socialistic outlook.
I thought the book came deeply from the left, and I even at times felt it was a communist or socialist book. That it looked at the destructive power of capitalism and let the reader realize how destructive predatory capitalism is, and that's what we have in this country, predatory capitalism. So I've been both surprised by the left kind of ignoring the book.
Has the left really ignored the book?
I think it has, but I also say that also
how do you mean?
Also because the book is 50% minorities. It's not about Trump voters. This is not. This book is
right, and the caricature is, oh, you're just doing this kind of played out, trite economic anxiety investigation of the quintessential Trump voter, which is basically not who the book is about. Although if you look at the cover, that might be what you infer. But I mean, I like the cover photo.
The cover photo was chosen not by me, but think about it. If I had put African Americans on the cover, I would have got criticized as well.
Are you happy with the cover photo?
Yeah, but there's a good story behind the cover photo, which I'll tell you why the cover photo is the cover photo.
Okay.
And then we can talk about the broader issue. The cover photo is of two homeless people, a white couple, and a McDonald's.
Where?
In West Virginia. Holding hands, I believe. They're holding hands. It's a male and female.
She's grasping onto his arm.
Male and female. To be on the cover, you have to sign a release. I had to find them to get them to sign the release 3 years later.
Wait, why do you have to sign a cover to be on?
Because it's merchandising. It's considered merchandising. So I had to find them. 3 years later, after this picture's taken, two homeless people in West Virginia.
Where in West Virginia?
I don't want to say because I want to protect their anonymity at some level, but
protect their anonymity if they're on the cover of the book.
But I don't want someone to go, leave them alone, right?
Uh-huh.
In any case, because, I mean, they signed the release. They're good people.
How'd you find them?
I went back, sat in the McDonald's for a week.
When was this?
It's like 8 months ago.
That's hilarious.
And
eventually what? They
I asked enough people. I showed them the picture, and they're like, oh, that's blah, and that's blah.
Uh-huh.
I knew their name. I knew their full names. I knew it from my notes.
Mm-hmm.
But so I could ask. I went to various homeless clinics. I went to me, the funniest part of this is unintended humor. Is one of them lives in a camp underneath, in the woods, basically, where a lot of homeless people live. I had to go trek back a mile into the woods to find this homeless camp.
You should have written just about this journey
and
to get the release sign.
So, and there are a lot of homeless tents illegally camping there. And so I parked my car one morning to find them at the end of the last parking lot before the trail goes off to the camp. And
this must have been in the dead of winter, right?
It was November. It was November last year.
Oh, okay.
So I'm parked in the camp, and there's only 3 other cars, and the other cars are staring at me. The people in the other cars are staring at me. I'm just like, I'm trying to figure out, why are these people? There's one with a vanity plate, that makes the person seem like they're a preacher. And there are 2 there's a beat up van, and then there's another beat up like Toyota. And so I'm confused what's going on. Why are these people staring at me? Eventually I come back I couldn't find them. I spend an hour back in the woods looking for this homeless couple. Eventually I come back, and as I'm leaving, one of the guys in the van makes a crude gay sex physical hand gesture to me, basically saying he would blow me.
Okay.
And so when I get back to McDonald's...
Wait. Do you think he was...
Well, so just when I get back to the McDonald's, there's a policeman there in the McDonald's who was there all often. I asked him, I'm like, because he had told me that this is where this camp is. And I say to the policeman, I was like, you didn't tell me it was a gay hookup spot. He goes, oh, I should have told you. You didn't know? The end of that parking lot is where people on the down low go to have gay sex. So,
maybe you should have gone through with it for the
including
experience.
one of the preachers in town, apparently. So, anyways, it took a lot to get that photo, and so by the time I got the two.
How did you end up back finding them?
I found him. I found him in a homeless shelter. I ended up leaving him the release and asking him to sign it and mail it to me and have his friend. They're not romantically inclined. They're just friends. She had been banned from the shelter for bad behavior. So they signed it and they sent it to me, and then I wired them the money that was their payment for signing the release.
How much did they get?
$500 each.
Wow, it's not bad. Jeez. I'm glad I asked about that. I thought it would just be a...
No, it seemed like the right amount.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem, of course, is, is how to.
Have you spoken to them since it was published?
No, I mean, I think he sent me a Christmas card.
Oh,
saying thank you.
I wonder if they've seen it.
But I forget what we were. Oh, going back to how the right has approached the book.
Right.
So, I think
you got a positive review in the Wall Street Journal. In
The Economist.
First Things.
The Economist gave it a very extraordinarily positive review, which I didn't expect.
First Things, right?
Yep.
And
National Review gave it a positive.
Right. I'm sure the American Conservative loves it. I don't know what they've published.
They gave it a very positive review.
Yeah. And yet you don't see any equivalence really on the left.
I've gotten, Noah, what's his name? Noah Blansky. He's an online guy.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He gave it a semi-positive review, actually. It was a very, I know you may not like him, but I get along with him, and I think he's a fair person.
We don't need to discuss that.
In any case, he gave it a half positive, half negative, and I actually thought it was a decent review. Mm-hmm. But in any case, I've been confused by the praise from the right. I think I assign a lot of it to the fact that I treat religion respectfully in the book.
Yeah, and that was going to be the last thing I bring up, actually.
Which is, I think so many on the right are used to secular people beating up people on religion that when somebody doesn't do it, they're overwhelmingly they're happy.
Yeah,
it's like, my God, I'm not used to. It's
frustrating. Don't you think it's because
it does frustrate me to? I've been a Democrat all my life. I've never voted for a Republican in my life.
Same.
So it's frustrating to me. I mean, to be very blunt, it's frustrating to me. I am also someone, and this is one of the things that working on Wall Street, I'll talk to anybody. Right. I will engage in anybody.
So you'll appear on a white nationalist podcast?
I'd rather not.
Yeah, just kidding.
I mean, I would like to. I mean, there's a difference between engaging and promoting.
Right. I mean, you'd hope that you can reach an audience without having to necessarily sink to that level.
I mean, my childhood was defined. The neighbor across from me. I had a neighbor across from me who was, I think it's fair to say, a member of a white nationalist group, if not the KKK. So my childhood was defined by ugly racial violence, and we were the one liberal civil rights promoting family in the town, so we got a tiny taste of the anger that is directed during that period. I mean, I will not at all compare what I went through at all with anybody who was a minority, but I know the divisions and I know what's at stake. I'm aware of who's the bad guy in this whole equation, so I have no interest in ever being involved with white nationalist. I saw the destructive power.
I know that was kind of a red herring on my part.
But in any case, it's hard in this environment to navigate it in a way that you get your message out without stepping on some landmines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything is so politicized, and I would much prefer to be. I am much more comfortable and much prefer to be on left-leaning podcast, left-leaning TV shows than I would to be. I would be much happier if Chuck Schumer liked my book than if Josh Hawley likes my book. But if Josh Hawley likes my book, I can't deny that he likes it. I can hopefully use that to say to him...
Chuck Schumer's a lost cause, I think, by the way.
I can say to him, hey, this is what I wish you would do. This is the direction I think you need to go in. Here's what I don't like about your process. You know, because I am curious when he read my book. I have, you know, and I don't want to, you know, I have some very anti-Trump things to say in my book, very blunt. I have a chapter called Racism that I think is pretty explicit.
Right. And we talked a bit about this off air, but my sense in reading the book was that you were conscious of some of the criticisms that would inevitably be leveled against you for doing what is perceived wrongly as yet another kind of cliched exploration of who the quintessential Trump voter was. Or like the downtrodden real American type. And so you blunted that potential criticism by focusing quite a bit on how you're very intentionally examining a multiracial phenomenon. And talking a lot about the adverse effects of racism.
I will reframe it differently, which is this book is reflective of the time I spent in these communities. I spent roughly, if anything, this book downplays how much I spent almost 80% of my time in minority communities. You know, of my 5 years, 3 years was in the Bronx, which is...
What if you exclude the Bronx? I mean...
Exclude the Bronx, it was probably 60% minorities, 40%, you know.
Okay.
Because that's how poverty is. I mean, let's be honest, the bulk of the poverty is disproportionately minorities.
But aren't there more impoverished whites in total?
This book would have, I believe, sold better if I focused more on if I had disingenuously focused more on the few white communities I spent time in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm glad my editor didn't force me to write more about Trump voters, because I suspect the book would have done better had I done that.
The book's still
but
doing pretty well,
it wasn't
isn't
reflective of the journey. The journey was spent more in minority communities.
Well, I mean, the book's doing well enough that you're getting pretty prominent endorsements. And even on national media,
it hasn't really sold that well compared to, they just want sales. That's all they care about.
No, but I mean, in terms of
no publisher cares if a senator likes your book if it doesn't generate sales. That's all they care about.
Well, I mean, Josh Hawley's a hot topic right now, so he could generate some sales.
I'm not going to turn away a senator approving of my book, even if I disagree with that senator.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that sentiment. But I'm asking.
But also, I think I'm also not foolhardy enough to be naive about any politician. Every politician, I think, is out there for themselves and out there to get elected, and they will do whatever it is needed to get elected. So I'm not naive enough to think I can influence him in any way, shape, or form. I hope I do. I hope what he took from my book. I saw in his speech some of what he took from the book. One was the importance of place. That clearly resonated with him. What I wish I had seen was an emphasis on how diverse the back row is. I mean, the back row is Kansas City. You know, his state includes a lot of his state has a large population of minorities in poverty, primarily in East Kansas City. And so I certainly...
St. Louis?
Kansas City.
No, I mean, but
East St. Louis is actually in another state.
No, but...
Is it St. Louis straddles... Half of St. Louis is in Missouri, and the other half is in whatever the other state is.
Yeah, Kansas.
No. Kansas is half in Kansas and half in Missouri.
Right.
St. Louis is half in St. Louis and half in Indiana?
Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah. I knew that. I'm
so
getting
the black
my
part,
geography.
the primarily African American part of St. Louis.
No, I was just saying that there's obviously blighted parts of St. Louis in Missouri that are back row.
Most of the blighted parts of St. Louis are actually in Illinois.
Okay. It doesn't matter.
Anyway, yeah, we've lost 90% of the listeners at that point.
Yeah.
But the point is there's a lot of poor minorities in Missouri, and it's only by sheer. I could have easily had a chapter about East Kansas City because I went there in this book.
Okay, but leave aside the stuff about place and religion, which I agree could be part of the reason why it resonates among some conservatives. Why does Josh Hawley even have the instinct to read the book in the first place or seek it out, as opposed to somebody like, I don't know, Sherrod Brown, whose shtick has always been that he is in tune with the white working class.
Brown to run for president, so
yeah,
I like his shtick.
Right, but why isn't he the one? Why isn't he seeking it out? And Josh Hawley
I'll tell you why, and this is actually a self-criticism of me.
Okay,
which is the part that I think appeals to Republicans is I blame our problems on the elite, all of the elite, the Republican elite and the Democratic Party elite. I think they very much see that and grab the part where I think a lot of people see that and grab the part where I disapprove of the Democratic elite.
You disapprove of the elite that you yourself were once part of,
right,
which is largely liberal politically, right?
I would assign more blame to the libertarian wing of the people I used to work with, who were part of the GOP.
But they were, socially liberal and
right. So if you
culturally liberal.
I blame the political elite of both parties, but if you wanted me to blame one more than the other, I'd blame the GOP elite more.
Okay.
I blame Jeb Bush more than I blame Hillary Clinton. If those are my stand-ins for the two.
Who enacted NAFTA?
What? I also blame the Democratic Party because you can read my piece about Clintons are nobody did more damage. Nobody did more to help Wall Street than Bill Clinton. I've said that.
Yeah. So basically, my takeaway has been that you implicate the liberal establishment, let's say the elite liberal establishment, which was the milieu that you were a part of. And the term liberal there is sort of loose because you could encompass libertarians as well. But people who had a certain cultural sensibility, I mean, you say that I voted Democrat, I considered myself a progressive, I tried to follow and be sensitive to issues that, elevated minorities and that kind of thing. And you implicate that world in the immiseration of people who inhabit existences that those people are never going to have any experience with.
I think I'll put it more.
And that's why certain conservatives like it, because it can be figured into their general anti-elitism, which predates Trump.
I put it this way.
But then leftists will use the fact that conservatives like it for those somewhat superficial reasons to then dismiss the entire work.
I will put it this way. Here's why I'm surprised I am not. Here's why I think it's a very much a liberal book. I blame our political structures for the problems in our country. I say we have structural racism, we have structural classism. These are structural problems that are not about the atavistic properties of the voters. That's generally a liberal view of things, which is that the political structure is broken and we need to overthrow it to help the working class. I think problem is...
I don't know if it's a liberal view so much. Maybe a revolutionary socialist view. If you have to overthrow the structures? The liberal just wants to tinker with the structures.
I don't know these terms. That's neoliberal to me.
Yeah.
That's neoliberal to me.
Okay.
So, but the point being is I side with I think it's become within a certain group of politically elites on both parties, it's become easy simply to blame the dumb voters for the problems.
Sure.
Rather than to blame the system. And I blame the system rather than the dumb voters. I think using the term dumb is offensive as hell, and I wish people wouldn't do it. But the way when the left looks at the way the right has talked about minority communities for the last 50 years, in the problems that are in minority communities, urban ghettos, they use the phrase, of high percentage of drug use, higher crime rates, higher percentage of people in poverty. The right, describe it in atavistic terms. They say the people are lazy, they just need to get off their ass and work. They need to get with God, or they need to, fix their culture. The left, when they see that, rightfully pushes back and says, no. Let's look at the political structures that these individuals face. Let's look at the secondary schools they're assigned to. Let's look at the way we assign the police and how our legal system treats people. And they look at the political structures and they say there's higher rates of drug use, there's higher rates of poverty because there are secondary job opportunities and there's secondary educational opportunities. That's the right way to look at issues in my mind. You look at the structure that people face, and you look at how they make decisions, and look at the decisions they have available to them within that structure. So I think when you look at how people vote or how they make political decisions you don't like, or if you look at the opioid addiction in white communities, you should afford them the same right. You should simply say, why are they doing these things I don't understand? And you should assign it to the political structures they're operating in rather than to being, quote, dumb or lazy or weak. I think that's how you approach every issue. As if you're a leftist, you approach every issue by looking at the political structures people operate and ask them, what does it do, and what do they face? What obstacles do they face, and why do they make the decisions they make within that structure? And I think some on the left fell too quickly into looking at the Trump phenomenon and simply saying they're dumb or they're racist without looking at why might they make the decisions they make.
Right. What are the conditions which give rise to them having those?
One of the things I hope people take away from my book is I think the conditions we've created for many working class Americans is conditions that are ripe for creating racism.
Right.
And that's awful. I guess it needs to be said. I'll say it. It's fucking awful if that's what we're doing. If you're creating a system that incentivizes in some people to go down a racist path, then you need to figure out how to change that system, because that's just awful.
Right.
And the people who suffer from it are the minorities, obviously. They're the ones who are going to suffer the most from the system.
Right. So let's delve a little bit more, as we somewhat close out this discussion, into I think one of the main reasons why, if a Republican like Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton were to read the book, they would be most touched probably by the religion chapter. And I found that to be probably the most interesting. And one outstanding question I have is how your experience, almost as an anthropologist or as an outsider seeking to understand how people derive meaning from their participation in these religious endeavors, how that then influenced your own personal beliefs as to the truth or falsity of religion, because you say that it actually did have a tangible impact on your own personal viewpoint.
Right. I mean, so initially I walked in the Bronx, a vegetarian atheist, and now I eat meat and go to church. I
still just had hot dogs.
I still count myself as agnostic.
So you self-identified as atheist at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
I self-identify now as agnostic to slightly religious leaning.
What does religious leaning mean?
Let me just give me a chance to answer, man.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting a little worked up now.
God damn it.
Yeah, we're past the hour mark, so I'm losing my mind.
My first recognition of that I was wrong in my prior views was very similar to how I view McDonald's. People use churches, man, and they were working. They really helped people. In these communities where there was nothing else going on, the only place that was lit up and treated people like humans, not like mice, not like a lab rat, was the churches. They opened their doors on Wednesday night and Sunday or Saturday or Friday, depending if it was a mosque or a temple, and they welcomed people, and people needed that, and they treated them with dignity. They treated people who haven't been treated with dignity. So there was a utilitarian issue. Religion is useful because religion works. It gives people people who need a sense of a community. It gives them a community. But then I started realizing that it was actually more than that. I must have attended 150 different services. I started realizing that in many cases, the reason so many people I was spending time with were religious was because they had a better perspective on the evidence for religion being as true as anything else. Meaning they understood, to me, and we can have this argument, I don't think it's going to go very well. I actually believe at the end of the day, and again, I just would like to gain some credentials here. I'll throw my credentials at your face. I do have a PhD in theoretical physics, so I'm not naive about science. But I think religion, the core, what I see in religion, the appeal of religion is the humility to accept we as humans don't have this under control, and there are things larger than us that we'll never understand, and we have to come in some senses accept that, and see faith as possibly the only out to deal with that. Whereas I look at science, and especially more kind of hardcore secular positivism, as kind of this having this weird certainty that womenkind, have the ability to eventually figure it all out.
But doesn't science have a built-in humility where it always, by definition, must be amenable to additional data that comes in, and therefore all prior theories are susceptible to revision if countervailing evidence is acquired? Whereas with religion, and again, we're kind of overgeneralizing here, but in terms of, like, let's just say theistic Christianity, for example, they're saying that the end state of the metaphysical realm is already known, because if you ascribe to that system of belief, you're saying that there is a omniscient, omnipresent force that intervenes in the material realm. That seems a lot more definitive and almost the antithetical to humility than me, because you know that's what it says in an ancient book.
I mean, I don't take the Genesis to be literal, and I don't think there are a few who do. I treat it as a metaphor for how the world began, and a metaphor that isn't so bad, actually. But going back to scientists, I think, yes, true science is what you said, but I think 98% of the people who practice science or believe in science don't practice it in that way. I think they're very certain, and they treat at any moment, at any time, they believe that what science has given them is the truth, and they don't have enough. The people who actually do science right are far and few between, and it's certainly not what filters down into popular press.
So you're telling me that religious figures don't exude certainty as to the nature of the universe and what one must do to get saved and all that, the afterlife?
I think they see the. I think there are a few people out there who take the Bible literally, but I don't think there's many of them left. I think the core view I take away from faith in aggregate, not any one religion, is that it's a recognition of the failures of mankind to ever, first of all, human fallibility, that we're all going to die, and that's and that we are not any greater than, we are all in many cases sinners who will never be able to figure it out. And that philosophically appeals to me. I don't think we'll ever be able to figure it out. What is the end goal of, like, so let's go back to the Big Bang, right? You have a knowledge of the Big Bang that's been handed down to you from the Mount, from Nova you might have watched a few Nova shows. You might have read Stephen Hawking's, right? Is that fair?
I did watch Nova, yeah.
Okay. So those are tablets from the Mount. And that's fair. That's great. I'm not diminishing that's how most people understand the Big Bang. But the Big Bang is a large mathematical metaphor which hides a lot of what we don't know. The Big Bang doesn't answer the big questions. Like, okay, so what came before the Big Bang? Can you answer that? Can they? No.
Right. And I'm not denying that.
We ain't gonna have an argument about the Big Bang, bitch.
Okay. No, I'm not trying to have an argument about the Big Bang with the PhD in theoretical physics. I'll get probably humiliated. But the point is that, see, you don't even have to say that. You don't have to attribute certainty about the nature of the universe to biblical literalists. I mean, there are Catholics who don't interpret the Bible literally, who will nonetheless say that you will be damned to hellfire for all eternity if you engage in X, Y, and Z. And it's not as if they're reading every passage of the Bible and saying this is literally true. So, but that's inherent to the basic precepts of the religious faith. So, yeah, they are exuding certainty in that respect that I would argue is actually is inimical to the humility that I think you would rightly want to find more out there in the world.
I guess I would frame it this way, and this is why I consider myself agnostic.
Right.
That my core view as both a scientist and as a non-scientist is that whatever this universe is, we'll never figure it out. To put it in a more...
But we learn more and more every day thanks to science.
Science builds great bridges. I always said science is great at building great bridges, and I'm glad I ain't anti-science. I'm glad science exists.
Who built the telescope that those two women used? Was it a religious prophet or a scientist?
We should build more. There's also a lot... The two aren't inconsistent. I know of a lot of theoretical physicists who are very religious.
Sure.
Being religious doesn't stop you from doing science.
Right. Non-overlapping magisteria.
You
know that term?
No.
Stephen Jay Gould, he had this whole idea about how science and anyway, we don't have to get into it.
The point being is science is great at building good bridges, and I'm glad we have science. We should fund science more. I'm pro-science, but it's not. It doesn't build good lives. It's not the basis for building a meaningful life.
Oh.
And it doesn't actually do a better job in my mind of answering the large metaphysical questions that I think you want to be answered. Why are we here? What comes before us? And I think I've come to the conclusion that I'm not sure we'll ever be able to answer those. And in that sense of not knowing, it's that Rumfeld thing, the knowable known
unknowns.
I know that there's unknowns that we won't know.
Okay, but the whole reason why I even brought up the subject in the first place, or not the whole reason, but one of the reasons was because you did this sort of anthropological quest, not to make it too extravagant, but that's sort of what you did. And I can imagine myself doing the same thing, and I have, as I've mentioned to you, gone to religious services, interacted with people who have vastly different beliefs than mine religiously, and I'm able to appreciate the value that they derive from it and engage with them in a respectful way, and yet still at the same time not allow that to impinge on my own conception of the universe, so I can actually bifurcate those areas of inquiry, so I can separate my kind of sociological examination of the role that this plays in their lives and the way that it can give them order and meaning and get them out of depression and help them get off drugs and all the kind of functions that we know that religion can play. I mean, we haven't really talked about the negative impacts that it can have on a lot of people, but that's a separate discussion. But which is all to say that I almost feel like it would be a conflation to then allow that to dictate to me what my own philosophical reasoning is as to whether theism is true or atheism is true, etc. You see what I mean?
I think you'll get there eventually.
Oh, come on.
No, but I mean, like, I don't know how to say. I don't know how to. In many ways, it reminds me of like part of my frustration with a lot of my theories, which is it's hard to argue for my theories because the very way we argue is basically neoliberal. You know what I mean? It's like I'm always playing on someone else's home turf, right? We adjudicate arguments by who has more data behind them, right? As opposed to, I'm arguing in some senses that we should not adjudicate based only on data. We should allow the emotional experiences that impact people to have as much resonance in terms of truthiness as data does. So I'm always going to lose this argument because the rules are whoever has the best data wins. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, but at the same... Okay, we'll move on for this. But, like, I can say there is a truth in your life where your practice of this religious belief allows you to be in touch with the sublime, to structure your daily existence in a way that is fruitful and even compels you to do acts of charity, whatever else. So there's a truthiness in terms of that lived experience, but that's got to be separate from whether it's true in terms of the broader metaphysics.
All you simply said was it was true because it was utilitarian, and that's the basis of all positivism, which is that the only things that matter are that which, quote, works. And I'm saying that I think life is more complicated than that.
Well, it's not that but you have to. But
okay,
truth
we're
is
going to bore
separate.
Everybody.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we'll wrap up here now. But okay, so let's leave the book aside and the religious debates aside. We last did one of these just after the 2016 election, and you and I were very fed up with how the media operates. And I still think that the election of 2016, in addition to the whole Trump-Russia saga, are just incredibly massive media failures in addition to everything else that they kind of portended. Do you see any improvement since then?
Well, if you're swimming in the Sea of Russia issue, I've been in the desert. Like
right,
I know,
forget Russia. Just the election
I guess what I'm saying is I know nothing about Russia.
Right.
In terms of how the media, I mean, I've also been away from the media for a year and 10 months.
Yeah, but you've been back.
Okay. I'm getting there.
Sorry. We're at an hour and a half now, and just losing all inhibition.
So, again, what struck me is I don't feel like the core point I've always said is that politics is decided by the fans, and I still see the same inside DC Beltway dominance. The media is still in many cases in a bubble, and when they try to leave their bubble, it's embarrassing. Like, I share the frustration of I share the frustration of the leftist outrage for most of the pieces about the Trump voters, which I find to be, you went to Youngstown and you only found white people? I mean, my piece on Youngstown, there's more black people in my piece than there is white people, because Youngstown is 50% white, 50% black. It's just they still do it wrong. When they do step outside of their bubble, it feels awful. And I don't want to condemn the media, because I think a lot of people are operating in low budget environment where they don't have the luxury to do what I did. I have to literally bugger off for 5 years without a salary. I don't think, that's a luxury I have that nobody else has. So I can't blame them for being on, they have to go in for 3 days and leave. But I'm still amazed with how tone deaf they can be about both the pieces about either Trump country, like, well, where are the pieces on Hillary country? There should be those. I agree with the left on that. Why aren't you doing that? But also, why are you obsessing about what Trump said in D.C. like 900 times, man? Like, you're being played. Don't you see it? He's playing you. He's playing you like a piano, man. Like Jim Acosta, was that his name? Yeah. He's getting played like a piano. But of course, he's playing along too, and that's
he's playing a different instrument.
Yeah, but it's no different than the professional wrestling, right? They're both benefiting. He's playing the bad guy. One guy's playing the bad guy. One's playing the good guy, and they're both making money out of it.
Yeah.
And so it's frustrating to see the media say, "Oh, dude, man, you're helping Jim Acosta is helping Trump more than then he's hurting him.
Yeah.
So stop saying be honest about what you're doing. You're trying to make money for yourself and your company by promoting Trump.
Yeah. Well, Jim Acosta is kind of a particularly vulgar manifestation of the media instinct, I guess. But I mean, in terms of taking a broader view, do you think that the so-called lessons of 2016 have been internalized as we now enter into a new cycle, or is it just going to be the same old thing?
Within the media or within the political base? Which one?
In the media.
I think the coverage is better than it was in 2016. So in that sense, I think they have gotten a little bit better. They are actually trying to get out of their bubble. I think they know it's a bubble. Mm-hmm. I think, again, the problem is they're focusing. I think a lot of the problem is they don't have enough money to do it right. Right? You know, I mean, the money is allocated weird to me. It's like, why do you need, so many correspondents in D.C.? Where's your 30 correspondents across the country?
Yeah.
Why do you? And they have those, and those people are doing good as best they can, but they don't have the money or the funding. And I think where
CNN and the New York Times have plenty of money.
There's again the classic DC correspondent. I don't know how many people they have there. The Maggie, what's her name?
Haberman.
I can't pronounce her last.
Maggie Haberman.
The Maggie Haberman style of reporting, I happen to like her. I think she does good stuff. But
she does on occasion. Yeah.
That style of reporting, which is sitting in which is local scoops from insiders and gossip, is missing how politics is really. I am still amazed that there has not been more of a shakedown by the fact that they all got the election wrong.
Right.
The Trump election.
Except me.
The Trump election of 2016, whether you like the guy or don't, I don't like the guy, is still probably one of the largest events in our life. Let's be honest. It was a huge political event. And that everybody got it wrong, except you.
Thank you.
That everybody in the mainstream media got it wrong. Should have had a lot of consequences. Should have been a huge amount of consequences. But of course, it reminds, again, I've said this to you before in private, it reminds me of the financial crisis. I was there during the financial crisis on Wall Street. Everybody on Wall Street got it wrong, but there were no consequences. Everybody just kind of shrugged their shoulders and moved on. Some people even doubled down on their strategy. Sometimes the people who did the worst got promoted the highest. There's been no reckoning in the media of what they did wrong in 2016 and why they got it wrong. The changes that have happened have not been large enough to incorporate the mistakes they made in 2016. I will even say, provocatively, and I believe it, them getting 2016 wrong was in some self-referential. They helped Trump win by being so certain that he wouldn't win. By being so certain that he wouldn't win, they made a lot of voters. They gave a lot of voters a reason to throw away their vote on a third party or not vote. If you went out there and said, Trump is going, there's no reason to even continue writing columns about this election because Trump is going to lose, like some people did. Mm-hmm. Then how can you not expect people to not vote based on that?
Right.
So I think
there are people who are less overt in their certitude now.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but
that's good.
But that's kind of a minor adjustment compared to the entire structural overhaul that would have been required after an event like that, of that magnitude.
But no industries do structural overhauls. It's their friends. So why are they going to fire their friends?
Yeah.
It's the people, it's their godmothers and godfathers. It's their cousin, or it's their fraternity brothers or sisters, sorority sisters. Like, why are they going to do that? That's not how industries operate. What you do is, I saw on Wall Street, is as long as everybody's wrong at the same time, it's okay. Right? You don't want to be the one person who's wrong. You got to lose money. In Wall Street, the rule is you lose money when everybody else loses money, because then it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that they probably will go overboard this time in overcompensating.
Yeah.
And when they probably should have a little more certainty about what's going to happen.
Certainty in what way?
I mean, the closer we get, I think people are going to be shy about saying what they think, and when they probably shouldn't be shy. I think to me, and this to touch on the last subject we talked about, and then we can end those. The biggest failing in the media, if you want to know where the media gets it the most wrong, it's just how they treat religion. People in the media don't get, even, yes, there are people in the media who now, there are notable exceptions of people who come from a religious background and get religion, but they are the exception, not the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And America is a very religious country. And the Democratic Party base is very religious. So it's not just Republicans who are religious. And so the way the media treats religion, I think, is the biggest disconnect between reality and how they view it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, in reading your book, one thing that came to mind was this concept of moralistic therapeutic deism.
Mm-hmm.
You familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's not really a hard and fast, theologically minded worldview. It's just that it seems like what a lot of the people in your book were kind of expounding, which is that they have this notion of a higher power. It's not necessarily fully formed, but it allows them to kind of orient their lives around, like, in pursuit of these ideals.
Where I feel like I've broken through, at least with the conservatives who like my book, is there's actually, is interesting. It doesn't surprise me in retrospect. A lot of the people who have a large voice on the right are religious, but they're religious elitists.
Yeah.
And so they don't know the religious communities I spent time with. I spent time in the Pizza Hut that got turned into a church, or the old shopping mall that was discarded, but somebody turned the Zales into a church, Yeah. That's the churches I spent time in. And that's actually looked down on within certain religious communities.
Mm-hmm.
So that I actually have a lot of respect for that word you just said, moralistic therapy. I have a lot of respect for the poorest religions, the Pentecostals, the most laughed at.
Yeah.
Because that's where, it's messy and it's not theologically sound to the elites, but it's where people find their faith.
Mm-hmm. All right. Want to leave it there?
All right. Thank you for coming. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye. Okay. There you have it. Hope you found that conversation as edifying as I did. As always, please remember to subscribe on Patreon if that's your thing. You can also contribute via PayPal. The links are in the various description boxes in which this podcast appears. Subscribe on YouTube, where I post these conversations in full, as well as other, quote, content. And that'll do it for now. So I will talk to you next time.